Computer, I think. All right, welcome, boys and girls, guys and gals, moms and dads, all you prosperity people around the world. Something extra special today because we have an extra special guest star. So this is going to be the newest podcast, Power Prosperity Podcast, but I'm also running the video, as you guys watching can see, and I'm going to put it up on Prosperity TV. So the podcast, I made a decision when I started it that I wasn't going to conform to some specific thing. That most people just interview others, and that's their thing. Every episode they have a different interviewer, person they interview, and the same questions. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to get tied down to that. I kind of like the podcast being more me, a conversation, me and the listener. But when I've got somebody who's really brings amazing value in the area of prosperity and success and mindset, then I love to get them on and do a longer form interview. And that's what we're doing today, because today I have a dear friend since the 90s, where we met. We're both professional speakers. I'm happy to say we're both now in the Speakers Hall of Fame because he was inducted last year. We're both authors and just good friends from the Miami area. Mr. Bob Berg is my friend and guest for you guys. So welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Sir Randy. I appreciate you greatly. And hey, congratulations on the quick and fast and immense success of your new book. That is awesome.
It is. It really is doing great. I'm really happy about it. So
yeah.
It is wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
There it is. Look at this. Good. See what I mean? This guy's a good friend. He even holds up and fills your book for you. I love it. So Bob is it 8 books, maybe 9 if you count the journal? How many have you authored or co-authored?
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a big part of them is a series which began with a book called The Go-Giver. And there's been several iterations after that. Go-Givers Sell More, Go-Givers for Leaders. And the latest one, which I think is every entrepreneur needs to read. It's a great thing to gift to a high school student or a college student graduating. It's called the Go-Giver Influencer. And Bob has done a lot of work in influence with salespeople, with business people, and just personal development in general. And this Go-Giver series, which he's co-authored with a mutual friend of ours named John David Mann, has become a movement, really, around the world and spun off all kind of things. So maybe let's start with that. For somebody who's not familiar with it, what is a go-giver? What does that mean?
So a go-giver basically is someone who has learned, or maybe they always intuitively knew, that shifting your focus, and this is really the key, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others, and understanding that not only is that a pleasant way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. Not for some way out there woo-woo reasons. It totally taps into human nature. I often say, Randy, when I speak at a sales conference, I'll begin by saying nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money. And they're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person who believes in what you do. They're going to buy from you because they believe they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And so being a go-giver has nothing to do with being anybody's doormat or a martyr or some self-sacrificial type of thing. Not at all. Not at all. It's just tapping into human nature, and it feels good to do it, but it is the way to conduct business in a free market. And when I say free market, I simply mean where no one's forced to do business with you. You must focus on that other person. I mean, it just makes rational, logical sense. Focus on that other person. They're much more likely to buy into you and your message.
So I know people often get confused and they think that you're talking about this in just an altruistic or a charitable way. What's the misconception on that, and how would you clear it up?
Well, of course, we love charity. It's a high value. It's something we believe in, but that's not the same as being a go-giver. That's being a giver, and that's wonderful, again, but that's not what being a go-giver is. You might think, well, go-giver, does that mean they don't care about making money or don't care about profit? No, a go-giver tends to be very profitable. Why? Because when they sell, they're not selling on low price. They're not giving away the store. They're selling by creating such an immensely value-based experience for the buyer. They're actually, a go-giver tends to be on the upper rung when it comes to price. And it's understanding the difference between price, which is a dollar figure, it's finite, and value, which is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, this service, this opportunity, this philosophy, this whatever it happens to be, that brings so much worth to another human being as they understand it to be of value, that they're totally willing to exchange their time or their money or their opportunity cost or what have you in order to attain this value. And of course, both of you make a profit. And as Harry Brown, a hero to you and a hero to me, he used to say, and I used to love this, when he'd say, in a free market, there's always, in a free market-based exchange, there are always two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because both of them come away better off afterwards than they were before.
Yeah, and Harry Brown, you guys got to Google him if you don't know him. That's Brown with an E, if I remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Harry Brown. So he was actually a libertarian candidate for president some years back, but a brilliant guy. And I got the chance to meet him at I guess Freedom Fest or one of those kind of things. Just a what a brilliant guy.
Oh, he was. And the nicest guy. It was said Harry was never in an argument with anyone in his life. And I can believe it, because Harry wouldn't have put the energy into arguing with someone, right? But he was but he was such a brilliant guy, and he had a deep understanding of and respect for human nature. And because of that, he was a wonderful salesperson, as well as a great economist, great political persuader. I always say he's the man who should have been president. And I remember once, I was doing a fundraiser for him. He ran back in '96 and in 2000. In 2000, he was down here in Florida. I was doing a fundraiser for him. And so we walked into a local restaurant to have lunch. It was just a lunch place. And I remember I walked in, and it's a crowded place, and no one said anything. And I'm thinking, I am in here walking with the person who should be all 50 states, he was on the ballot. It's not like, but the man who should be president, not one person knew who he was. What a shame.
Yeah, what a shame. But he left some brilliant work behind, and it's work for you guys who want to see. And this is why I asked Bob to be on, because you guys who are long-term podcast listeners or Prosperity TV, I'm always talking about the way you create wealth is you add value and you solve problems. Right. And if we spin it a little deeper, we can say you see possibilities. But of course, the possibilities that you see are additional or new or innovative ways to solve problems and add value. And I think there's a lot of commonalities between the principles of the go-giver and the principles of prosperity. So any thoughts on that you would riff on for the lovely folks at home?
Well, for two aspects of that, actually. One is, one of my favorite sayings of yours that I've tweeted quite a bit is, and pardon me if I get a word or two of this wrong, I don't think so, but where you say you don't have a money problem, you have a value creation issue.
I say, okay, if we're gonna, the quote is, nobody really has a money issue, they have a nobody really suffers from a lack of money. They suffer from a lack of ideas.
Ideas. Okay.
Yeah.
I took that and messed it up, but the same bit, but the same premise. And that's really, what it is. Now, law 5 is the law of receptivity. And that's all about abundance and being able to accept that abundance, because one of in the story, Pindar, the mentor, says to Joe, Joe, breathe out and hold that outgoing breath to the count of 30. Well, Joe tries, but within about 10 seconds, he's struggling for air. And Pindar says, what's the matter, Joe? Can't do it? And Joe says, no, I can't just breathe out. I've got to also breathe in. And Pindar jokingly said, well, Joe, what if I was to tell you it's been medically proven that it's actually healthier to breathe out than it is to breathe in? And Joe laughed. He said, silly. It's possible. You can't do it. You've got to do both. Aha, right? We breathe out, we breathe in. We breathe out, which is we breathe out carbon dioxide. We breathe in oxygen. We breathe out, which is giving. We breathe in, which is receiving. Now, here's something, and I bring you up. I think I mention you at every single program I do when I'm going through the 5 laws from the Go-Giver, because I talk that they need to get your blog and your podcast and your TV show and all your books and everything, because they do have to. We all have to. I have to. And the messages that we receive, as you've talked about, right? And I say they're not mixed messages that we get from society about prosperity. They're not mixed. They're negative. They're totally negative. Okay.
Right.
And we get those. So people would think, well, giving and receiving are opposite concepts. And I say, no, they're not. They're not opposite concepts. They're simply 2 sides of the very same coin. It's not, are you a giver or a receiver? That's the treacherous dichotomy, or what we call the false dilemma, the unnecessary use of the word or. It's like when you were, I don't know if you ever heard this when you were growing up. I know I did, and most people have. Hey, when you get older, do you want to be wealthy or happy?
Right.
Well,
Such a negative question.
Right. That's like when you talk. Premise. Yeah, well, exactly. It's a false premise. And it's like when you talk about, when you quote the first Spider-Man movie, Gentle Uncle Ben, a great guy, a wonderful guy, taking care of Peter Parker. And he says to young Peter, we may not be wealthy, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest. Yeah. So what's the implied premise? What's the presupposition? That if you're honest, you're not wealthy. And if you're wealthy, you're certainly not honest. Right. And so when I talk about the law of receptivity, yes, you begin with the giving. You focus on the giving. Money is an echo of value. If you're constantly providing value to others, okay, you set that motion for receiving, but you still got to be willing to accept it. Now, and then what I talk about a lot of times is my friend Randy Gage talks about all the unconscious mind viruses that we willingly, but of course not knowingly, accept, which keeps us. We can be good at the giving part, but not the receiving part, whether it's worthiness issues or whether it's whatever it happens to be. So to me, the Go-Giver has everything to do with prosperity, because if you're focused on the giving, okay, and you've earned the right to receive, not the trying to think of the right word, and I say it all the time and I'm not remembering it. The right, not the when something's given as forget it. What is it when we talk about it's a entitlement? Entitlement, right? The right, not the entitlement to receive. The right, you have the right to receive because you've earned that right, but you've got to be able to accept it. You've got to be able to receive it. And I think about this time when right after the book came out, I was with my bookkeeper at the time, Trina, and she was doing some work on the computer, and she was making notes with this pen. It was it wasn't a fancy pen. It was a really neat. It had a great design on it. I kind of thought it was cool. So I said, Trina, where do you get that pen? I want to get one of those. She goes, oh, here, take it. You have mine. I have plenty of them. I said, oh, no, I can't, can't do that. She goes, no, really, I've got plenty. Just take it. I go, no, Trina, I can't take your pictures. Why not? Well, it's your pen. I couldn't take it. She said, Bob, it's really a pretty simple 2-step process. Number 1, take the pen. Number 2, say thank you. Now, I had just co-authored a book that came out where law number 5 was the law of receptivity. I like to think I'm pretty good when it comes to receiving. And yet, how often do those things just come into our head for no reason at all? And yet, because it's just how it is. So what I say is to people, we've got to constantly work on abundance thinking. And that's why I say to get your, to religiously subscribe to your blog and your podcast and your YouTube. Why? Because we've got to get that consciously fed into our mind, because we get the garbage all the time. We get the stories about Enron. We get the stories about Tyco. We get the stories about Volkswagen and their falsifying their emissions record. And those are
Yeah,
real.
and it's coming out. They even did it again after they got caught. They were still, and they knew that, and everybody, and they still were doing that, I guess, in Europe. So that's
And the bank that where they were selling false, those happen. And by the way, typically those things don't happen in a free market. Typically those things happen based on cronyism, because that particular field or whatever has made donations to certain politicians, and so they're able to operate under special rules and regulations. That cronyism should never be confused with free market capitalism, where basically, everyone's playing by the same rules. And if you commit force or fraud, you go to jail and so forth. And of course, no one has to buy from you in that case. So you've got to please the marketplace. So there's just so much that is, I think, confused in today's day and age about what prosperity is and what it means, and certain truths that we've got to put that into our heads consciously, because the garbage is already out there.
Can you run through some or all of the other 4 laws, the go-giver laws, that
Sure.
for people who haven't read the book?
Yeah. Well, the first one, the law of value, says to give more in value than you take in payment. And again, that's understanding there's a difference between price and value. Okay, so it's always that customer feels so great about that buying experience that they feel they received a lot more in value, and they did, than what they're paying, while you make a very, very healthy profit. Law number 2 is the law of compensation. This says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number 1 says give more in value than you take in payment, law number 2 tells us that the more people whose lives we touch with the exceptional value we provide, the more money with which we'll be rewarded. And of course, the people who you teach all the time in your major market is, this is what they do. They're touching people's lives both directly and indirectly. But because their influence is able to spread, the value is able to spread. You could say, exceptional value plus significant reach equals very high compensation. And that's so important. Law number 3.
So wait, before you go to 3, so somebody's watching, they say, well, of course, there's 2 old white guys talking about giving value and getting compensation. The system is rigged for them. They don't know, they don't know what I'm going through. How do I participate in this if I'm not a old, rich, white guy?
Well, I am getting old. I make no doubts about that. And I'm fine with it. Well, here's the great thing. The free market does not play favorites. The free market, right? Again, we're talking free market, not cronyism, not where you have special advantages, rules, and regulations. The free market plays no favorites. It judges based on the value you provide to others. And I know too many people around the world of different colors, genders, races, sexual preferences, I'm not sure what religions, who have made it very, very, very big, and those who haven't. And, so are there inherent advantages in being an old white guy? I think we've seen in society, of course, and there's been such horrors along the ways in many. So in no way am I meaning to diminish that, not at all. But I'm saying that if someone is, we had a conversation about this once on my podcast, where we talked about the fact that, when people want to say, well, no one's a victim, there's no victim. Of course there are victims. There are people that horrible things have happened to people they have nothing to do with, a tsunami or being in a place where there's just such massive poverty or a car, hitting you while you're helping someone else. There are victims. The question becomes, what are you going to do about it? Okay. Are you going to stay in that victimhood, or are you going to find a way to thrive, to do what you need to do in order to, so I think that's really what it comes down to. And free enterprise, where everyone can create value, assuming they're in that type of environment, is what levels the playing field and makes it so that anyone and everyone can thrive.
Good. I want to go back. I want to explore this free enterprise versus socialism in a couple minutes. But first, if you'll share laws 3 and 4, and then maybe we'll jump back to this.
Sure. Law 3 is the law of influence. And the law of influence simply says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Again, not to be confused with their interests first, but not yours, or you're sabotaging yourself. No, not at all. It's understanding that, basically, as Joe, the protege in the story, learned from several of his mentors, the golden rule of business, of sales, and I would say of free markets, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's simply no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to that other focus, looking for ways, as Sam, one of the mentors, advised Joe, to make your win all about the other person's win. That's just good business as well as good life. And then law number 4 is the law of authenticity. And this simply says that the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in the story, one of the mentors, Deborah Davenport, shared a lesson she learned, that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and of course they are all very, very important, but they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. Now, when you do, when you show up, as we like to say, as yourself, right? Day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you. They feel secure with you. They feel safe with you. They begin to know you. They like you. They love you. They trust you. They're much more likely to want to be in relationship with you. They're much more likely to want to do business with you. They're much more likely to feel very comfortable referring you to others. And, Randy, it begs the question, well, so if being authentic is such good business, why do some people show up not authentically, but rather as I guess the correct Latin term would be phonus balonus, not authentically. And we might default to the answer, well, they're just dishonest, or they're crooked, or they're trying. Again, it's a big world out there. There's all sorts of people, but I don't think that's usually it. I think most of the time when someone does not show up authentically, it has more to do with the fact that they simply don't have self-confidence enough to do so. Because let's face it, it's really difficult to show up authentically when you don't feel you have anything worthwhile or worthy of showing up for. That's the worthiness issues you also talk about. And so
for you guys listening and watching, I hope you see the parallels between my prosperity work and Bob's go-giver principles and like the worthiness issues. I mean, that's like 90% of the stuff that I'm dealing with the people I'm coaching is they were programmed since they were 3 years old that they were born a sorry sinner, and they've just had nothing but that kind of programming ever since. And they can't allow themselves to be healthy, happy, and successful, because if they do, they go through this whole imposter syndrome and they think they're a fraud.
Yeah. And it's, and because it's unconscious, that's a tough thing, because we can't improve upon what we don't recognize. Right. Yeah. And that's why the unconscious is that's why it's so insidious, because we don't know. And until someone's ready to learn, they're just not gonna, there's just not that awareness. I think that when we talk about, having the self-confidence, I think as human beings, we have 2 types of value that we bring. Okay. First, there's intrinsic value. In other words, just from being a human being, I think we bring value. But we also have what I call market value. And I define market value as that combination of strengths, traits, talents, and characteristics that allows you to bring value, to add value, to give value to the marketplace in a way that you will be financially rewarded. Different people have different, I think Mike Littman was the one who coined this phrase, assets of value. And the challenge with with knowing what those are is that we're human beings and we're too close to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I say to people, and I'm 61 years old right now, there's times I still look in the mirror and see that skinny 16-year-old who had absolutely no confidence. And, and I still see that guy,
Uh-huh.
and so, we all do at times. And so it's difficult on an emotional level sometimes to recognize that, well, let's put it this way. There's times I've been mentoring someone or coaching someone and just informally, because I don't generally do that on a formal basis, but where the person's told me what they're doing. And I said, well, that's fantastic. That's great. And their response was, oh, no, everyone can do that. And they weren't being falsely modest. I'm not talking about that. They really didn't see it because it's just what they do.
Right.
Now, it may have come intuitively to them, or they may have worked hard at it, probably a combination of both. But it's so much part of their world, they don't see that they bring something special to the table. That's why Randy people undercharge a lot of times.
Yeah.
They allow themselves to be negotiated on price, and they start playing the low price game. And when you sell on low price, you're a commodity. When you sell on high value, you're a resource. But you've got to have that confidence in yourself to be able to help someone understand the benefits of what you bring, the value of what you bring, and why that's worth that higher price than what some other person is offering it for. So that's why it's so important to have a coach or a mentor or or someone who cares enough about you and knows you well enough to help you work on understanding and grasping and identifying with and embracing your value. But they're not so emotionally involved or emotionally close to you that they also can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Yeah. You need somebody that loves you enough to tell you the truth, somebody who has your highest value at heart, because not everyone does. There are going to be some people who they'll tell you the truth as they see it, but they've got petty jealousies or other factors coming in, or they're fearful that if you become too successful, you'll take away their excuse for not being as successful.
Right.
And so they don't do it intentionally. Usually it's usually subconscious. They kind of sabotage you in a way that that is disguised as trying to help you. So that's a really important thing. And then, like Bob is telling you now, that they can't be so close to you that, like those mothers who send their kids to So You Think You Could Dance and American Idol, or talent shows, when they have absolutely no talent in that area and they're just set up for complete disaster. But the parent thinks that they're protecting their child by telling them they're an amazing virtuoso and they're a train wreck, right?
They
So
probably do think that about their child. They're so close. They can't,
yeah.
see, isn't my child the smartest you've ever seen? And
Yeah. So obviously the laws of go-giving are really good for salespeople. They're really good for business people, but it's not really business. How much of this would you just put in the personal growth category? That, in other words, anybody who read this book, how it would apply to their health and their relationships and their happiness?
Well, I think any universal law, of course, translates across the board. So when we look at success and the different areas of success, there's success in terms of financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, and probably a dozen other ways. And if you look at that, you're focused on the giving of value, focusing on bringing value first. Don't you do that in every relationship that you want to be successful in? Now, again, you don't do it out of a sense of sacrifice or anything like that. You do it because it's the right way to do it. When you're looking to lose weight, you don't say, okay, well, once I lose 20 pounds, then I'll start eating correctly and working out. No, you have to give first. You start working out and eating correctly, So I think it's the same with anything. That's also why we had a component in that book about Joe and Sue's relationship. Because we also wanted to kind of, even though it was a business book and the publisher's a business publisher, we also sort of wanted to show that it works in those areas as well. So yeah, and we've got, we've had different people. We've had families say they use the book as a family discussion, family teaching. We've had it in, athletic teams and houses of worship, and everywhere. I don't know everywhere, but a lot of different places where it's not simply a dollars and cents business type of.
Yeah, it's really turned into a movement around the world, the whole Go-Giver movement. And I'm really excited about the latest book in the series, which is the Go-Giver Influencer. And when Bob sent me like a galley proof, and right away I said, this is going to be the one that sells more than 1 million copies. This book is going to storm the world, because I think there's such an insatiable demand for that. I do this major event every year called Tribal, and the people come to that are speakers and authors and coaches and consultants and political leaders, and they're people who want more influence. And even if you're in the corporate world, if you're working at IBM or Hewlett Packard, you want to know, how do I have more influence in my job? If you're running a Boy Scout troop or Girl Scout troop, you want to know, how do I have more influence with my kids? If you're running a nonprofit and you're running a home for unwed llamas, you want to know, how can I have more influence to track people to this cause and help support the work I'm doing? So I'm just big. I love the whole series, but that book, I think I'm the biggest fan of that book.
Thank you.
Share some thoughts on that for someone who hasn't read it, and why they need to, because I'm telling you now, if you're listening or watching this and you haven't got the Go-Giver Influencer yet, you got to do it before the sun sets.
Mm-hmm.
So give them some idea what that book can mean to them, if you would, please.
Sure. And of course, John David Mann he's the writer of the team. He's the storyteller. I'm a how-to guy. Not that John isn't a great how-to guy. He is, but he's such a wonderful writer. So, and I think he just exceeded himself in this one. And this is our favorite book in the series. And the Go-Giver Influencer, in a nutshell, it's being able to get the results you want when dealing with people in such a way that not only do both parties come out ahead, but doing it in such a way, Randy, that the other person feels genuinely good about themselves, about the situation, and about you. And, as important as, again, we talk about sales skills and technical skills. Yeah, they're very important, but they're just entry into the game. Okay. There's a lot of people with talent out there. And sometimes, we say, well, there's not enough. Yeah, there is. There's a lot of talent out there. A lot of people are really good at what they do. Yeah. But unless you have the people skills, you're only going to go so far. On the other hand, when you are able to work with people in a way that's constructive and in a way that is influential, and I want to come back to that word, now you're 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game. So if we ask the question, what is influence, right? You and I are always checking premises and always defining terms. On a very basic level, influence is simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. Now, that's the definition, but I don't believe that's the essence of influence. The essence of influence is pull. Pull as opposed to push. We've all heard the saying, how far can you push a rope? And the answer is not very far, at least not very fast or very effectively. And that's why great influencers don't push. You never hear people say, well, that David or that Mary, she is so influential. She has so much, she has a lot of push with people, right? She is so pushy. No, of course not. They'd say she's very influential. She has a lot of pull with people. That's what influence is. It's pull. It's an attractiveness. Great influencers, who we would call genuine influencers, attract people first to themselves and then to their ideas. This is what the greatest leaders do. This is what the greatest influencers do. And you have to ask the question, okay, so what causes that pull? What allows you to attract someone? And again, this goes back to that moving from that I focus to the other focus. Dale Carnegie, in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I love that book, I believe the underlying premise of that entire book is where he wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So the genuine influencer always asks themselves questions to make sure their focus is correct, okay? And some of these questions might be, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals? With their
That's such a simple question that almost nobody ever thinks about. Say that again, please.
Yeah, well, the genuine influencer would ask the question, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, with their wants, with their needs, with their desires? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? How does it align with the problems they have that they would like to solve? Okay. And so when we ask ourselves these questions intelligently and thinkingly and genuinely and authentically, not as a way to manipulate another human being into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment as opposed to depending on some type of compliance.
We're both fortunate enough that we're old enough that we got to meet people who influenced us personally. And I think for me, a big, one of my highlights was spending time with Og Mandino and Zig Ziglar. And I know Zig was really a big impact with you. What can you share anything about Zig and what he meant to your life or your career?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you bring that up. His was the first. Let's talk about age here. His was the first cassette tape program I listened to. That's old. That's one step above an 8-track tape, Randy. Cassette tapes. Remember those?
You don't have to ask me. Some of you guys watching the show are going to have to Google it. Not me.
Right. Something we never knew about back then. Cassette tape albums. That's what they were called, right? And that was the first one I ever listened to. And he gave me so much information. I would put that in the car and I just listened to it over and over and over and over again. I just kept listening to it. And his how-to was wonderful. His why-to, his just how to be a person. And he just had these wonderful sayings, which when you think about it are so true. When he said, and this is so often misquoted, and I hate that it's misquoted all the time, but it always is. It's when he said, you see, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. And what was he saying? Focus on creating value, on bringing value, on communicating value to the other person, and your needs will be taken care of, right? Because money is an echo of value. So yeah, it was so, and then I got to, of course, meet him. And actually at the event we did, remember when you spoke at the event, I think you spoke with Dr. John Maxwell. And,
in Florida,
Barry Wilkerson. And so the year before that, we had because we used to have those every year. We had them once a year. And we had Zig at the previous one before that in Orlando. And he was on stage, the last couple of years of Zig's life, of course, he had very bad short-term memory issues because he had fallen down the stairs and he hit his head. So the last couple years, his daughter Julie or his son Tom would be on stage with him to kind of help keep him on track. And it's such a credit to Zig that he did that because he wanted people to see him operating out of that context. And so on this particular day, his son Tom and the redhead, Mrs. Ziegler, were both on stage with him.
The
right?
redhead.
Yeah, and I got to imitate Zig in front of Zig, and it was just such an honor to do that. But Mrs. Ziegler told me afterwards that it was the only time in Zig's entire career she was on stage with him. I thought, isn't that cool? But here's the thing: after they got off the stage, they took about an hour, and they would have stayed longer, but they took as much time as was needed. It turned out to be about an hour to sign autographs, but not just that. They engaged with people, and they hugged people, and they answered questions for people. And I got more emails after that event, okay, saying that was the highlight, that the Zieglers were exactly the same off stage as Zig is on stage, and what you would expect. That he was really just a quality guy. And again, you and I got to meet and appear on stage with so many of the legends. And it's always a thrill. I kind of like a fanboy or whatever. It's like I just think of some of the people I've gotten to share the platform with, and it's like, wow, I can't believe that still.
Yeah. Who else was an influence on you? Somebody that really impacted you. And what did that mean for you?
Tom Hopkins certainly was. What a wonderful guy too, and people like Brian Tracy. And he's so much wisdom. Oh my gosh, just a guy who studied and learned, and wow. And I remember, he was really such a cool person. I mean, I remember one time I was in the Atlanta airport. It was about midnight, and I had just come back from a program, and it was the connecting flight back home, and I looked like a mess. I mean, I was beard growing. It seemed like I had a full beard. I was one day, unshaven and hair look, and I'm just kind of drooping. And who do I see? Brian Tracy walking. I'm telling you, Randy, the guy looked perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, clean shaven, his hair looked great, his suit looked pressed. I said, how do you do that? How you can't look this good
right
at midnight as you're coming back from your own program? But it's just Brian. And
yeah, Nito Cobain's the same way.
Nito is the same
where
way.
You see him.
Yeah.
What a wonderful looks guy. Like he rolled out of a GQ photo shoot.
Exactly. What a leader he is. For this guy, and he came over penniless without speaking English, and just took responsibility for his life and built up a huge empire. Now the last, 15 years or 10 years or something, he's now the president of High Point University.
Yeah.
Took that from a struggling university to one of now the top. And
owns a chain of bakeries and a bank. And I mean, he's done just extraordinary for himself, and just a wonderful guy.
And a nice guy, just the greatest. And, he always has a kind word to say. When you're with Nito, you kind of feel really like he is so totally focused on you. And I've never written him a note where he didn't write a nice note, handwritten note back. I mean, just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So tell the story. I'm assuming you're probably in Borneo or a mountaintop in India with John David Mann, and you were smoking some magic mushrooms, and the concept of the go-giver happened. How did that come about? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it wasn't quite as exotic as that, but Randy, my first book, which came out in its first incarnation in the 90s, it's now been, I think, revised a few times, but was Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was really for salespeople and entrepreneurs who, they may have had a great product or service. They believed in what they did. They understood the value they brought. But when it came to going out and meeting people and prospecting and developing relationships, it just wasn't, something they felt comfortable with. So I wrote the book, Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. Now, this was back in the day, again, where there were like 3 networking books that were written, right? And now,
and that book was one of the iconic classics.
Thank you.
And the book and the seminar and the album. I mean, there are millions of people who would reference that, like you do Zig Ziglar, or I do Og Mandino. You did. I mean, you reached a lot of people with that.
Oh, thank you. And it was a how-to book, and throughout the years, I'd always loved reading parables, right? And everything from Og's book. That was my first parable. Og's book, the greatest salesman in the world, right? We all started with that in sales, and then of course Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon, and all of those, and then was at the end of the 70s, early 80s, Dr. Spencer and Johnson, the 1 Minute Manager. It seems like that's about when that came out. And I'd always read them. And what I loved about parables was, of course, they were short, they were to the point, but they were stories. And stories connect with people. There's an old saying, and like many old sayings, it's kind of true, but not totally true. And the saying is, facts tell, stories sell. Well, that's not totally true. And John David Mann is the one who told me this, and I just love this. Stories connect. Now, once you have the connection, that heart-to-heart connection, now the selling can happen, right? But one of the things I loved about parables was I could read them, and there was I connected with them, and I was much more able to learn from them. I thought, what if we could take the basic premise of endless referrals, which again is that all things being equal, people will do business with, refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, and turn that into a parable. So I said, well, so what's the major characteristic of a person who's able to both quickly and sustainably build those know, like, and trust relationships? And the answer is they're givers. They're always giving. They're giving value to others. Their focus is on bringing value to others. And they build a huge network that day of buyers and referrals. And so it was easy kind of to come up with the name, the Go-Giver, which, by the way, a lot of people think is the opposite of a go-getter, but it's not. We love go-getters. Go-getters get things done. Right. You and I both, and everyone watching this and listening, we're all business people. We know you can have the nicest thoughts, best ideas, and the greatest of intention, but unless action is put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. So we love go-getters, people of action, and go-givers, people who are focused on bringing immense value to others. So the opposite of a go-giver then is actually a go-taker. That's the person who feels entitled, the word I couldn't think of earlier, who feels entitled to take without having added value to the person, the process, of the situation. So came up with the name, the Go-Giver. But here's the best thing I did in terms of this entire book. I called my friend John David Mann, who at that time, by the way, I had never met personally, but he was the editor-in-chief of Networking Times. Remember that? Yeah. And he was always just so great when he would edit my articles, and he was brilliant, and everybody who knew John knew he was brilliant. But the way he would edit the articles, because sometimes because you've written so many articles, the editor will sometimes leave our best stuff on the cutting room floor. Then they don't ask, right? But John would always, every month, he'd write back exactly what he did, and he asked, is this okay? And what, and the running joke became, I just almost automatically answer him, John, not only is it okay, you write my stuff better than I write my stuff. And just such a great guy. But when I knew that writing a parable was not in my, and John Maxwell explained the difference. It's not that it was outside my comfort zone. I'm okay with operating outside my comfort zone, but it was outside my strength zone. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, you know what? I want John David Mann to be the co-author, lead writer, storyteller. So basically I got on the phone and I asked, and when I say asked, I mean pleaded with John to co-author this. And he checked with who he calls his higher power. That would be Anna, his wife. Mm-hmm. And then actually they came down, they were visiting her mom in Tampa, across the state from me. They actually drove over about 4 hours. We had a 3-hour dinner talking about the book, what it would be about, and what we kind of envisioned for it. And then he called me back a few weeks later and said, I think we have a good idea here. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's so that was really that's really how that first book came about.
Yeah. What year was that? How long ago?
It came out December 27th, 2007. So it actually 2008 is for all intents and purposes. So it's about 11 years old now.
Yeah. Wow. So since I'm doing a long form Tim Ferriss style
I was just thinking that here, too. Yeah.
He always asks his people, hey, okay, if you could have a billboard and you could put anything on it, what would it be? what would you tell Tim if he asked you that?
Oh boy, it's a great question. It's one that it's one that you would think that it should just boom come right off the top of my head. But I would say that if you can focus on dealing in truths, you're always in the right direction, because it's not a matter of what we would like the world to be, or what we like people to be, or what should be, or what's not fair. Okay. It's that there are certain rules of nature, both physical nature and human nature, and we disregard those at our peril. Now, don't get me wrong. For anyone listening, I'm not saying we have to just accept things the way they are. That's not it at all. But you first have to deal with truth in order to make changes and make things better. And, I would say it's sort of like the people who invented flight, right? They didn't say, well, we'd really like to have this machine to fly, but this gravity thing is really a pain, but I'm just going to have a positive mental attitude and just ignore gravity. So let's go on top of a cliff and jump off with this machine. Well, obviously that'd be insane, right?
Yeah.
So no, what they did is they dealt in truths, and they learned physics, and they learned the laws of aerodynamics, and they learned how to, right? And then they utilized those truths in order to propel them to make things better. So that would be that one thing. Learn to deal in truths, not in the way you would like things to be.
All right, so the first book was The Go-Giver. Endless Referrals is probably still out there in the universe, all over the place.
Yeah.
The Go-Giver Influencer is the latest one, and you really got to get the first one and the latest one for sure, everybody. It's Amazon and anywhere books are sold. It's Bob Berg, B-U-R-G, with John David Mann, M-A-N-N. Tell people where's the best place to reach you.
Yeah, they could either go to Berg, as you said, BURG.com, or they can go to The Go-Giver without the hyphen, thegogiver.com, and they can get a chapter 1 and an excerpt, whatever, to read first to see if they like it. Then they can always click through.
And Twitter, Facebook, Insta, what's the best place to follow?
And on the website, it shows how to click to me in all those places. So yeah, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and have kind of started with Instagram now over the last 6 months. I was a late adapter or adopter, whatever, to that. Mm-hmm. I'm not always the one with the foresight. I was the guy in the 90s who said this internet thing will never actually take off. So that's.
And for you guys listening, he really does engage on social media, so he's a good guy to connect with there.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for doing this. I just, I'm a big fan of your work, a big fan of your books, and
Likewise.
John David as well. And there's so many similarities, so many parallels in the principles of prosperity, the laws of go-giving. I just thought it'd be really great to have you spend some time with my tribe, and I'm really grateful that you did.
Well, thank you, and likewise. And you're one of my heroes and mentors and teachers and best friends and everything. So I'm just delighted to be your guest.
All right, and for all you guys listening and watching, go out there, have an amazing day. Love you all. Peace.